Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny is a 2023 American action-adventure film directed by James Mangold, who co-wrote it with Jez Butterworth, John Henry Butterworth, and David Koepp. It is the fifth and final installment in the Indiana Jones film series and the sequel to Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, released in 2008. The film is set primarily in 1969, and the film follows Indiana Jones and his estranged goddaughter, Helena Shaw, trying to locate a device that could change the course of history before Jürgen Voller, a Nazi-turned-NASA scientist, can take it for himself and change the outcome of World War II. Dial of Destiny is the only film in the series that is neither directed by Steven Spielberg nor conceived by George Lucas, with both serving as executive producers instead. It is also the only film in the series not to be distributed by Paramount Pictures, following Walt Disney Studios' acquisition of Lucasfilm and a deal between the studios that transferred film rights for future sequels. Paramount retained the distribution rights to the first 4 films and a residual associate credit. Plans for a 5th Indiana Jones film date back to the late 1970s, when Lucas and Spielberg negotiated with Paramount for 4 sequels to Raiders of the Lost Ark in 1981. Lucas began researching potential plot devices for a 5th film in 2008, although the project stalled for many years. Koepp was eventually hired to write the 5th film in 2016, with a release date set for 2019, although this was delayed several times due to rewrites and later the COVID-19 pandemic. In 2018, Jonathan Kasdan was hired to replace Koepp, who returned to write in 2019 before eventually leaving the project altogether. Spielberg was set to direct, but stepped down in 2020, with Mangold taking his place. Filming began in June 2021 and took place in various locations, including the United Kingdom, Italy, and Morocco, wrapping in February of 2022. Longtime franchise composer John Williams returned to compose and conduct the film's score. With a reported production range of $250 to $400 million, it is the most expensive film in the Indiana Jones film series, as well as one of the most expensive films ever made. The film debuted on Out of Competition at the 76th Cannes Film Festival on May 18, 2023, and was released in the United States on June 30th by Walt Disney Studios Motion Pictures. The film received praise for its performances, John Williams' musical score and production design and story, but was criticized for its runtime, overuse of CGI, and was considered inferior to the original films in the series. Having just grossed $247 million worldwide thus far, it is deemed as a box office bomb. The cast includes Harrison Ford as Indiana Jones, the world-renowned globe-trotting archaeologist and college professor. Mangold considers Jones a phenomenally unique hero and a brilliant nerd who's also a badass. Phoebe Waller-Bridge as Helena Shaw, Jones's goddaughter. Mangold identifies Helena as the catalyst of the film, kicking off the film's plot after dragging her godfather into a problem. The filmmakers described the character slippery, charming, and the girl next door, a grifter, pioneer in the ethical accounting. As similar to comedic characters with machine gun dialogue akin to those of Ben Hitch's plays. She's the daughter of an old friend of Jones, named Basil. Mads Mikkelsen as Jürgen Voller, a former Nazi during World War II, has been hired by NASA and seeks to use Apollo moon landing program for his own gain. Mikkelsen felt that Voller is a man who would like to correct some mistakes of the past with the film's MacGuffin to make the world a much better place to live in, pitting him against Jones as he wishes to retrieve the artifact as well. Antonio Banderas as Ronaldo, an old friend of Jones who operates as an expert frogman. Banderas claimed that his character is not a villain but a good guy who would die for Indiana Jones. He enjoyed working with Ford, Mangold and Steven Spielberg, who co-produced one of their previous films, The Masks of Zorro. John Rhys-Davies as Sallah, Jones's old friend who aided in finding the Ark of the Covenant in 1936 and the Holy Grail in 1938. Sallah has since immigrated with his entire family to New York City with Jones' assistance and now works as a cab driver. Toby Jones as Basil Shaw, an Oxford professor of archaeology, ally of Jones from his days in World War II, and Helena's father, who was obsessed over the dial. Boyd Holbrook as Kleber, Voller's nefarious and trigger-happy right-hand man in 1969. And Karen Allen as Marion Ravenwood, Jones's ex-wife, who aided him in finding the Ark of the Covenant in 1936 and the Crystal Skull of Akator in 1957. Despite Ford's age, Marshall and Spielberg ruled out the possibility of recasting the character. Ford said, "I am Indiana Jones. When I'm gone, he's gone." Despite Ford's age, being 80 at the time of filming, Spielberg said Jones would not be killed off during the events of the film. Likewise, Mangold never considered killing off the character. Ford was paid $10 to $12 million for his involvement. Waller-Bridge described her character as a mystery and a wonder, and Mangold referred the actress to Barbara Stanwyck's performance as Jean Harrington in The Lady Eve in 1941 as a key reference point. Mangold and the Butterworths wrote the role specifically for Waller-Bridge, inspired by Karen Allen's performance as Marion Ravenwood in Raiders of the Lost Ark. Mads Mikkelsen's character Voller was partly inspired by the Nazi scientists involved in Operation Paperclip, including Werner von Braun. Von Braun was a German and American aerospace engineer and space architect. He was also a member of the Nazi Party, as well as a leading figure in rocket technology of Nazi Germany, and later a pioneer of rocket and space technology for the United States. Karen Allen also expressed interest in reprising her role as Marion, noting in 2011 that she and Jones were married in the previous film, so it would be difficult, I think, to move forward without her. Allen's return was kept secret in the years leading up to the film's premiere, and she said when anyone asked her if she was in the film or not, I had to come up with something to say like, I could tell you, but then I'd have to kill you. Her scene was shot in a day and a half. Following the release of Crystal Skull, they both criticised the film and Spielberg, although Mangold said he did not factor that into Mutt's absence in Dial of Destiny, saying, I didn't really think Indiana Jones having a son really worked in the essence of the film. Later it's referred in the script that Mutt went to the Vietnam War and unfortunately lost his life. Ford was digitally de-aged for the film's 1944 opening sequence to depict his appearance during the first 3 Indiana Jones films. The de-aging process used several techniques, such as new software from ILM, which looked through the archive footage of a younger Ford in previous work for Lucasfilm, including his original Star Wars films. Ford was somewhat spooked by the de-aging process, but was nonetheless impressed. Mikkelsen was also de-aged for the opening sequence, though with a different method. In 2012, Spielberg had rejected the idea of de-aging Ford with motion capture, akin to the method he employed in The Adventures of Tintin in 2011, saying that he wanted Ford's age to be acknowledged in the film. By mid-2019, Spielberg and Koepp had devised a 5-minute World War II sequence that would feature de-aged Ford, and Mangold would later expand it to 25 minutes. Now, I absolutely loved the original Indiana Jones films, and was probably a little less impressed by Crystal Skull in 2008. But the first 3 will always just stay in my memory, as they're just really true action-adventure, fantasy, fun films. And Harrison Ford played Indiana Jones absolutely perfectly. Now, when I saw this film was going to be released, I was quite excited to see exactly what they were going to do. Were they going to keep in line with the previous Indiana Jones films, or try and reinvent the character, as it were? Look, I have to say, they really do a good job here in keeping with the action-adventure aspect of the Indiana Jones films. Some of it, of course, is quite tongue-in-cheek, but overall it's just good fun. I was somewhat skeptical of an 80-year-old Harrison Ford still playing the iconic character, but then again, having anybody else play this role would have just been a waste, and they write his age into the story quite well. The film does highlight his age and the new era in which Indiana Jones now lives. And I have to compliment the de-aging process that was used in the first 25 minutes of the film that transports us back to Indiana versus the Nazis. I just loved that sequence of the film. It was probably my favorite part. And frankly, even though it may be somewhat eerie to see a young Harrison Ford now playing in this role, in the same breath though, it's just wonderful to just have one more moment of the original Indiana Jones at his swashbuckling best. Unfortunately though, this film is probably one of the weaker in the series. Firstly, its runtime is just far too long. The film really didn't need to be this drawn out. And unfortunately, it just does not live up to the hype of the original films. But in saying that though, it will still give you a good time and make you smile. Although there are some poignant and sad moments within the film, as you now look back, of course, on Indiana Jones and how age eventually comes for us all. Look, this film is made purely with a nostalgic fan base in mind. And in many ways, the Dial of Destiny itself almost acts as a metaphor for the film, since it's the movie that actually really wants to go back in time, playing off our original love affair with these action movie adventures. Unfortunately, I think they just took too long to make this film. And also not having Spielberg at the helm just loses something as well. Not to say Mangold isn't a good director, but it was really Spielberg's project at heart. The film just loses this grandiose aspect of the original trilogy, and probably would have been just better to just leave it as one of the best trilogies of the 80s. Phoebe Waller-Bridge is very good in her role and does exactly what she does best. And Mads Mikkelsen once again turns out another good performance here as the main antagonist, although I do feel he's almost overused in this type of role. Look, this is an enjoyable film. It's fun and it's real adventure, and it's pure escapism at its best. I loved the first 25 minutes, but I just felt the film maybe went on a bit too long. Harrison Ford is as ever as good as Indiana Jones, although his age is of course showing, understandably. But for me, this is an example of Hollywood not creating original and new concepts, but rather playing off old ones. What they should have done is really focused now, for example, on the Uncharted series, done that properly, and you would have had a brand new action-adventure series, instead of relying on the old tales from the 80s. Good action fun, relying heavily on nostalgia, with just far too long a running time. Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny gets a 7.5 out of 10.